In this video, I will cover the Storyboard Plus project, which is the project you do right after the storyboard. And in short, what you're really doing is making a real-time, set-to-sound presentation of your storyboard frames. And also, you take your best shot at the hardest part of the animation. Let me expand on that by going over all the steps inside of Canvas. So the objective, basically what I just paraphrased, was the two parts. The one is making the presentation, and the second part is trying the most difficult part of your animation. So let's delve into the specifics of part one. Make a frame-by-frame presentation out of your storyboard. Add sound. The sound could be a section of one or more royalty-free songs and or royalty-free sound effects and or royalty-free voice. So if your characters are going to be talking, that voice would be your voice or voices. Then what you do is you space out the frames so that they match the anticipated time of the final animation and sync in with the sounds. When you look at one of the examples, you'll get a better feel for how that goes. So we'll look at that in just a second. Let's jump on and talk about part two here. So what you're going to do here is basically get a jump start on the project. You're going to say, okay, I anticipate this section, like right in the middle or towards the end, wherever it is, that you feel is the most difficult part of your animation, and you're just going to jump in and try it. So you know how to do basically everything in the program that really matters as far as animation goes, from the midterm and all the other projects. And now you're just going to apply that, the critical thinking, if you will, part of the class, and give it a shot. Then that way, since you tried the hardest thing out first, you have the whole rest of the semester to work that out, and hopefully the rest of the animation goes even smoother. I don't make a minimum time requirement for this, so it doesn't have to be 3 seconds or 5 seconds or 15 seconds. It's just whatever makes sense. You just get in, you try something that you thought was going to be very difficult, and you basically hopefully prove to yourself, yeah, it wasn't that difficult. So just give it an honest attempt. Okay, the requirements. So we'll first go into the part one requirements to the storyboard presentation. There cannot be any animation, so please don't zoom in or out on one of your storyboards. If there's a zoom in, we'll see that because you'll have the little, arrows around the box. So no animation whatsoever. You're just basically one frame of the storyboard pops up one after the other at the appropriate time. However, you are going to account for everything but the animation. So it shouldn't require any explanation. You shouldn't have to tell us that, oh, well, there's going to be this other part. All the parts should be there. So if it didn't come across in your storyboard project, then you make another frame or two, whatever it takes to fill in the gaps so that we totally understand when we hit the play button and watch your animation, well, not your animation, but your storyboard set to sound. So the timing of the sounds should be worked out, and the frame should be placed at the key moment where that key visual information represented by the frame happens. All sounds in your final animation should be included, and the animation sound should end or naturally conclude at the end, or I should say it should naturally conclude or it should fade out. One of the worst things in an animation is where the animation comes to a stop and then so does the music, like right in the middle of a sentence, or it sounds awful. So it should either, here's my imitation of a song, it should either come to a natural conclusion like ba-da-bop, or it should fade out. Da, 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 da. Okay, that's my imitation. All right, so you will have an FLA and a SWIFT file as normal. The stage size should be based on your final animation. So most likely your keyframes, since we did them smaller, will have to be scaled up to fit the frame size, because the largest dimension has to be 800 pixels. So if your stage is square, or your frames that you made for your storyboard were square, that would mean it would be 800 by 800. But if you followed along with me and did the 16:9 ratio, that means it'll be 800 pixels wide by 450 pixels tall. If your stage is tall, like cell phone tall, then the height will be 800 and the width will be something less than 800. Just as long as one side equals exactly 800 pixels and the other side is 800 or less pixels. The frame rate that we'll be using for this project, we're bumping it up a little bit to 24 frames per second because we want it to be nice and smooth. The length of this project is, well, you've got to account for all 20 keyframes. And remember, the minimum amount of time for your final animation is 25 seconds. So this should be a minimum of 25 seconds long. The maximum, if you're going for the contest, is 2 to 3 minutes long. And just keep in mind, the minimum for the contest is 1 minute. And my suggestion to you is keep the contest in the back of your mind. But if you're really nervous, just shoot for about 30 seconds, because what can happen is if everything starts going really, really well, you can just patch in some more music in there. Maybe use what you already have and do another fade in, fade out of another song in a part, or just start spacing it out. And you'll be surprised at how easy it would be to make it go from like literally 30 seconds to a minute. I know it's twice as long, but a lot of times what you're fighting with is things are going by too fast for us, not for you, because you've seen it many times over. But when we start watching each other's animations, that's usually the key feedback is, whoa, that happened too fast. That part needs to slow down so we can enjoy, take in what's happening. Okay, the required code, the Swift file must launch stopped, meaning that there is a stop action in the first frame. When you do command return, it just launches, stopped. So you have to go up to control and play. There must also be a stop at the last frame. You might think that's redundant, but the key thing is to make sure that you have the sound set up correctly, and this will tell if the sound is set up correctly. Okay, so all of that was for part one, which is the presentation of your storyboard set to sound. And then part two, like I've already said, is to jump in, try the hardest part, but don't do it in the same file, right? Because the file that we already have been talking about is for the presentation of your storyboard, and there cannot be any animation in it. So you will just simply make a new file and you will just jump right in, attempt the hardest part, and turn in the FLA and the Swift for that. No sound is required in that attempt. It's just to get in, get your hands dirty, so to speak. Okay, so the files. When you finish with this project, you will have 4 files to turn in. The FLA for the presentation, the Swift for the presentation, the FLA for the hardest part, and the Swift for the hardest part. The presentation file will contain a stop action on the first and last frame that we, as I just mentioned, and all actions will be on the top layer, and that layer will be named either actions or A. That's just professional practice for working with actions. Finish watching this video. Go back and watch this video again, Storyboard with Music, that is located on the Prof. Steve G WordPress site, and starting at about 1 minute and 40 seconds in, you get to see this storyboard set to music. Basically the same project that you are going to do. And then take a look at that actual animation. So just go to Student Work, Digital Animations, Sound Animations, scroll down till you see the hair, this one right here. Just share with you real quick what her hardest part of the animation was figuring out how to get this hair to flow like this. And I'll tell you, just I can remember this, what she ended up having to do was, it was a lot of shape tweening to get that done. But what she had to do, because as you've probably experienced, the shape hints and everything are not really that awesome with shape tweening. So she ended up having to make like this section of hair, and then she made this section with an overlap and probably broke it about right here. Made this section with an overlap and then this section. So she had 4 different layers of hair, but you obviously can't tell that when you watch it. So that was, and as soon as she solved that problem, the rest of the animation was fairly easy for her. And as always, do yourself a favor and look at the grading rubric, and look at all the different things in specific that I will be looking at when I grade your project. Study that video with that animation that we just talked about of the final project with the hair, also the storyboard set to music for the hair. Look at some other student work for motivation. And then next I will have a video for you on working with sound, getting the sound ready to bring in to animate, and then also working with it, doing the fade in and fade outs inside of animate.